All right, Chris, we are back in the mix. I got in from the convention last night. We're recording on Zoom, so anybody who's watching it might look a little bit different. What was it, like a system-wide from CrowdStrike, right? It's kind of shut everybody down, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a good thing you got in because apparently airlines are just absolutely fucked.
Well, it's not like they were unfucked before. I was literally like I think 14 hours late getting to Milwaukee because of delays with American, and coming back wasn't, it was a little couple hours better, but not much. Um, so at least they have something to blame it on this time.
Right.
Uh
No refunds. No refunds, no, right?
yeah, I'm glad I got in before they could use that as an excuse for no refunds. All right. Well, it's been an interesting week. So let's not bury the lead. It's all things convention right now, right?
Yeah.
I guess top level, what are your thoughts overall? It's over. Trump gave his the longest acceptance speech in history. And what did you say? Never it's okay to shoot yourself in the foot, but not your dick. I think
Well,
that's
yeah, it's
I think that's a Chris Matola quote.
yeah, it's okay to step on your dick, but it's not okay to jump up and down on it.
There you go. Okay. All right. So did he do himself any favors with his acceptance speech after I think what would be considered a very successful convention?
Yeah, so let me kind of reverse a little bit. I never I've been doing Republican campaigns since 1980. And with the exception of a couple that I actually had to work at, I have never watched a minute of convention coverage or a speech. And the reason I don't do that on purpose. I mean, it's a great convenient excuse, but it's also I do it on purpose because if you're working on campaigns, your job isn't to have an opinion on what happened. Your job is to work with the opinion of swing voters on what happened.
Wow.
And if you would, and I'm making this up, if you polled swing voters today and you said, this is the greatest speech in the history of mankind, you go, this is great. Let's start running clips. If you
Right.
polled swing voters in Pennsylvania and they said, what the fuck was that? That was like, something from fucking, Stalingrad.
Right.
And then you got a problem. And you don't, and the practical thing is you don't use footage of the speech.
Mm.
And so it's kind of a post decision about whether it was good or bad, depending upon what you had to do.
Right.
Um,
Right.
I do know in the past there have been speeches which were widely panned and did very well because they needed to coalesce a Republican or Democratic base. And everybody said, oh, the speech is way too partisan. No, that's what it was trying to do. It was trying to be partisan and
Sure.
you get a big bump out of it.
Sure.
So I think most of I mean, and you were there, so, Milwaukee. But I think most of the analysis was they had a really good convention. Trump had a really good convention. And the speech, the beginning, the first half hour of it was great. And then it was like, what the fuck? I mean, it was like, one of Castro's kind of, 4 hour speeches.
Yeah.
Unless it was to prove, unlike Biden, he could actually go the distance. But I don't know. What was your thought on it?
Well, I think it's interesting. It makes me think of just how important brevity is because usually if you just get in, accomplish your mission and get the fuck out, it's when
Mm-hmm.
you're successful. The longer you stay in there and you go on these things, I think that's when you have I think that's when the opportunity of really hurting yourself comes in. I think it's important that the whole point of us talking and kind of fantasy elect and all of it is exactly what you said. Everyone has an opinion, but what's important is how is it going to play in the people who are going to make the determination. It doesn't, who cares what I think, right? I live in Texas. Trump's going to win Texas, right? Um, I think interestingly, um, he shot himself in the foot in the sense of there was a narrative that was building of he's a changed man. And this narrative is played multiple times and it's worked every time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if he had stopped in the first bit of the speech, that narrative would have played, and he could have won suburban soccer moms in outside
Mhm.
of Philly and outside of Michigan, outside of Detroit and Michigan, and he might have won some key swing states. Um, but the more he talks, the better it is for the Democrats.
Mhm.
Conversely, I will say, you and I had spoke during the week about JD Vance. I think he helps suburban soccer
Mhm.
moms. JD Vance does, and I see a little bit now of why that might have been a smart choice. He really plays up his Appalachia roots and his Rust Belt cred. Um,
And his wife is dynamite in the suburbs. I mean,
yeah,
I would have her on in everything.
yeah.
You know, 'cause, like,
Interestingly enough, how much more interesting would this race be if it was Josh Shapiro versus JD Vance at the top of the
yeah,
ticket? What a cool, I mean, young guys, the future of their parties. Um, I don't know anything about Josh Shapiro's family and wife, but certainly let's say there's some equality there, there's some parity. That would be a really interesting race to watch rather than either way, let's just suffer through the next four and then we'll turn the corner. So,
yeah. There's been a little Josh Shapiro boom, and so Pennsylvania, my home, well, one of my home states, but I was born in Pennsylvania, Philly. Um, Very well thought of, very popular. He was. I did the first race against him, which I lost. First major race was for county commissioner in one of the suburbs, and I remember doing it, and it was a tough race. We had a my guy was in scandal free, but it was a scandal ridden administration. People were like clean sweep. But you also saw just how smart Josh Shapiro was,
mm,
and he wasn't your typical, you know, local mope who kind of wound up there, which kind of how people feel about Kamala. She's kind of wound up there. No,
yeah.
Josh Shapiro's never taken a fucking stupid breath in his life. When he ran against a very Trumpy guy for governor. Went into the Republican primary, advertised and promoted the Trumpy guy so he could get him in the general election, which
Sure.
is a fairly nervy, sophisticated play. And the other piece, his first spot out of the box was him going to Shabbat dinner. No matter where I've been, no matter what I've been, Friday night, I have Shabbat with my family.
Mm,
And he shot it in a diner. And he's kind of a liberal Jew, so having Shabbat, you can have Shabbat at the local
yeah.
diner, and but the whole idea of family, and that played extraordinarily well across the state because it said the guy's normal. It took the Jewish thing right away, and the fact that they did it like a little diner, you kind of go, he's not, he's not going to be wailing at the wall.
Right.
Um, the second thing that he did, which made him really popular, is early into his term, a section of 95, which is the interstate that kind of goes through, fucking collapsed. They rebuilt it in under a week or like 9 days.
Right.
And in LA, if it was California, it would have been, there would have been nuclear war before it was rebuilt. But
Yeah.
basically, they had it back going in under a week.
Right.
Uh, and they had like one lane. I mean, and I think they still continue to work on it, but literally the big interstate within that connects Philadelphia that everybody uses every friggin' day
Yeah.
was down for basically a week. And they waived environmental rules. They got the unions to waive stuff. They got the local bit. I mean, it was one of these things that everybody kind of worked together and they
Yeah.
just got shit done. And everybody was like amazed. Oh my God, people actually got shit done.
Right.
So he's very popular. But yeah, it would be an interesting thing between him and Vance because Shapiro is kind of your typical moderate Democrat. I mean, politically, he's your moderate Democrat from, the kind of that doesn't really exist a whole lot anymore.
Yeah.
But Vance is a new Republican. He is this populist, nationalist, America first, isolationist
Yeah.
thing. And it would be a really, really interesting race. And I think that kind of race would be really healthy for the country. Not
I
to mention, by the way, the greatest thing I heard about Vance being on the ticket,
yeah.
somebody said he's the only guy on either ticket that knows how to open a PDF.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's 100%. Ian, it's funny that you were talking about Shabbat because I think that there and also about the populism, the new Republicans versus the traditional Democrat. I think there are two key things there for me. I think it would be an extremely exciting race for those two at the top of the ticket. To me, I think there are some stark differences between them. So I didn't mean to equate them at all. I think that Shapiro is he comes across as authentic. And for me, Vance does not. Vance is like too smart by half in some ways, I see, in my opinion. And the other thing is, I don't think the country is at the populist stage right now. Actually, I don't think that the majority is. I think that there is a large enough minority that it has altered the dynamics of our politics. But I think most people are in the moderate center right, center
Mhm.
left traditional space and see a place for America in the world. Um, so it's interesting. Like I think in that race, I would put money on Shapiro just based on
Yeah.
those, but pre-race, not seeing how they run. But I do think it would be extremely exciting for a young ticket like that. I think that's what we really need. So yeah, and that's how I kind of felt with the Trump speech. Was like, this is just a reminder that we have as good as it gets for right now, and we just kind of need to
Right.
survive the next four. Um,
But by the way, I think the speech, from
yeah,
what I'm seeing,
yeah.
and I'm always, when people say, "Oh, it's 3D chess," you gotta shut the fuck up. Nobody in politics is smart enough to place. But I do think, based upon the early feedback I'm seeing on Twitter and on Facebook and stuff,
Yeah.
and just by randos, this actually keeps Biden in the race.
That's what it looks like. Did you see the tweet from Biden today? I look forward to getting back out on the campaign trail, and some people said that's it. He's not going to drop now.
Yeah, and I think that the speech. I mean, if Trump had killed it, I think that would have been Biden saying, "I compete." But I'm sure they're watching it in the bunker in Rehoboth, and going, "You can do better than that. You can beat him. You just had a bad." You can just hear them
Yeah.
ginning him up.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and that's kind of like ay. And
So you're not buying it. You're not buying that Trump's speech left an opening for Biden, that Biden is still perceptive wise, politically speaking, far weaker in that
yeah,
race.
yeah. I mean, in Biden's, I mean, Trump did not give a, again, not having seen it, not knowing what people think, but I think the consensus is that it was a long, rambling, and not particularly great speech.
Hmm.
However, he, he didn't call his vice presidential candidate Biden. He didn't, apparently didn't have any egregious errors. You could actually understand what he was saying. He didn't
Right.
mumble it and go, well, anyway, Jack. I mean, whatever the fuck it. I mean, I think that it doesn't help Biden, because Biden's problem is Biden. By the way,
Yeah.
I would be remiss. Trump released their first TV spot,
Hmm.
and it was the framing was pretty much the standard, the reelect thing, that they're after me because they're after you, and I stand in the way of that, which is fine. In the middle of the spot was one of the most extraordinary things I've ever seen in a presidential ad.
Hmm.
And in the middle of it, there are 3 shots of Trump in his 20s, Trump in his 40s, Trump in his 50s. And then they cut to Trump, present day. And I think the line is, and it's somebody talking, you can't, but it's like, whenever they attack him, he just gets stronger, or is what I think was the line. But these 3 shots that go across, basically half a century of Trump, and you kind of go, he's okay. He's older, but he looks. It's not like, if they would do that with Biden, it would look like the end of Indiana Jones and the Holy Grail.
Totally.
And it was really extraordinary and shocking. I mean, I'm not always shocked by these things. I'm kind of watching and go, yeah. and like it was like I had like cartoon eyes kind of bugged out because it was
Yeah.
really smart and sophisticated.
You know what? For and this is stuck in my mind for a while. For all of the Hollywood elite talk with Democrats, I and maybe it's just a Trump phenomenon,
Mhm.
but as far back as 2016, he seems to have the best advertising. He seems to have the best marketing, the best comms team. Am I wrong about that? Or like, who are the people that, I mean, is it him? Does he, I think he actually has, I think he's a marketing, he's a brilliant marketer. He gets it. He gets branding. So I wonder what the genesis of that is. But as much of the talk of like Democrats are in bed with Hollywood, I mean, they can make flashy production value, but the substance is never there. Um, in a smart way like that, like what you're saying, like and I think you could do something similar for Biden. It doesn't have to be on age, it could be on substance. In 1970, I was saying this about working class. In 1990, voted
Right.
this in working class. With Obama, I did this in working class. You can make the same lifelong comparison just on your field.
Yeah, no. So in terms of the Trump advertising, it's been done by a number of different people. I don't know if the current group are public, so I'm not going to tell you about who they are. But in 2016 and 2020, it was done by Larry Weitzner and Jamestown Associates, which is a top Republican firm, and they did really good stuff. I think, though, to your point, that Trump is his best marketer, and it all goes through the Trump filter. I also think that 2016, when I occasionally give a lecture or teach a course or do whatever the frig I do, and I spent a fair amount of time talking about the 2016 election and the advertising, and which goes to Hillary Clinton being running one of the worst campaigns and probably the single worst campaign in modern American history. In the worst campaign in the 20th century, and trust me, I've done some of the worst ones, but the worst presidential. The number one issue in the country was the economy, and Hillary Clinton became the first candidate of either party in the television era never to run a spot about the number one issue, the economy. She was the first candidate never to write an issue about the economy. And the entire premise of the campaign was basically Orange Man bad. And the spot that everybody remembers was called, I think it was called Mirrors or Windows. And it was these kind of Hummel looking kids staring at a TV, that looked like they had given them too much Benadryl. And, while they're playing Trump saying bad things. And it was like, and the spot got accolades. And I remember saying it and thinking, this is the dumbest fucking thing ever, because like, we know that about Trump.
Right.
Like,
Right.
this guy, this guy has been in the public consciousness, at the top of the public consciousness for his entire life. We know he's an asshole. And meanwhile, Trump was running spots that basically said, I'm an asshole and you need an asshole now because things are.
That's right.
And but I think all the filter goes through. I thought that the stuff for Biden and Hillary was very well produced and empty. As I always say, I can't remember a single Biden spot. I can't.
Right.
But I can remember Biden in the elevator with the New York Times elevator operator. I can remember Biden talking to the kid with the stutter.
Right.
And I can remember Biden in South Carolina with the guy that had lost his wife. Right. And those were all social media grabbed on iPhones or, and I think it's kind of damning to the Biden campaign that their best moments were shot on iPhones. And again, the people that are doing the Biden advertising, are smart people and they're good people. They've done a lot of campaigns, but there was something about the campaign structure and the campaign leadership that doesn't let them do that really good stuff.
You know what struck me here, and I'm curious what you think about this.
Mhm,
So in 2016, when he was running, I remember reading an article about how he would hold events, or even like in Trump Tower or whatever.
mhm,
He would often go eat in the kitchen with like the staff, like the
mhm,
people that worked in Trump Tower.
mhm,
And I recently just read something, I want to say it was like at UFC or something, and a guy who worked there was like, "Oh yeah, he hangs out in the back with like the people who are working the event." He's so interesting. All of that to say, it just struck me as we're talking about why he's good at these things. I think that he has, and this might be the
mhm,
single most endearing thing for me because I'm kind of similar. I like to talk to bartenders if I'm at an event. I like, hey, how
mhm.
are you doing? Whatever. Um, but he reminds me of like a startup founder who's out talking to his ideal customer rather than talking to like VCs. Like, you know what I
Right.
mean? And as you're talking about Hillary, she strikes me as the exact opposite. Like she doesn't know what her ideal customer wants. She just knows how to spit the game to a VC to get fundraising, right? I got this new app and I'm going to do this and blah blah blah. But she doesn't she's never once talked to a customer. So
Right.
I think I as I'm thinking about what you're saying, and I think he has his finger on the pulse because he does these rallies, he talks to people, and he likes to be around them for whatever reason, may not be all good
Mhm.
reasons either.
Right.
But he knows what they're saying. He's listening to them, and he's listening to them in a way that he's thinking about how it will benefit what he wants to do. So it's the ideal startup founder. You're getting user feedback.
So here's a story, and I will not use the name of the person, but he is a big Democratic contributor fundraiser that Trump was courting.
Mm,
And this is back in 2014, 2015, prior that he was running, but it was for some project that he wanted to get this guy to invest in.
yeah.
And Trump said, let's go play golf. We can talk about business after. No, let's go play golf. And guy said, great. And he goes, all right, I'll make a tea time at, what's good for you. And they had a tea time at, 8 o'clock in the morning, like a really prime tea time.
Yeah.
And Trump says, he said, I'll come by and pick you up. Trump actually drove his car outside the guy's house and fucking beeped the horn, popped the trunk, and they went and they did a drive through to get coffee at McDonald's or something. And they went and they played golf, and it was, because it was a lovely day. But he
Yeah.
said Trump drove the car, went through the McDonald's thing, and like, if I said to you, let's go play golf, that's what
Yeah.
we would do.
Yeah.
Contrasting to Hillary, who said, "Oh, I don't have a driver's license. I haven't driven a car in 40 years or 50
Right.
years," and
Right.
you kind of go, "What? Like, A, why would you even admit that?"
Right.
But I think to your point was that when you do normal things with normal people, you are not in this weird beltway thing. And again, a high-powered politician like a Trump, like a Biden, like a Hillary, is surrounded by people blowing smoke up their ass every day.
For sure.
And you need really loyal people and loyal friends that will tell you the truth. And you need loyal staff that will tell you the truth.
Hmm.
John McCain famously had that, famously had Mark Salter and a bunch of other people that would say, John, that's fucking stupid, and
Yeah, you need
well,
that. You need that, right? Yeah.
you need that. And the Biden people, I think it feels like they've got this closer and closer circle. And,
Yeah.
if you don't, it's literally the emperor's new clothes. If you don't
Hmm.
say it looks great, you are banished because we don't need that negative talk around here.
Right. Right. Right.
And that is a really dangerous thing. As a consultant who's worked on campaigns where candidates like to talk to the average people, you just finished a project and it's good. And they say, well, I talked to, Fred at the 7-Eleven, and he says people don't care about that at all. And you're going to go like, you know,
Pardon me.
bless you. Hold on. I hear something beeping in my kitchen.
All right. I tried to meet that before the sneeze, but I didn't get there in time.
My wife is away, by the way, so I get to make red meat and roast pork. So
Nice. You get to enjoy the yeah, the
yeah,
bad
I mean,
things.
she's fine with me having it when she's around, but it's just like it's not the same. I feel like I'm, you know, I feel like I'm having an affair. Uh,
Yeah, which
uh,
doesn't make it more enjoyable.
right, right. You know, it's just like
So let me ask you a question.
yeah,
I think it's really interesting what you said about Trump driving himself. Immediately, what comes to my mind is Hillary, Joe Biden. They didn't come from wealth, right? And as someone who didn't come from wealth and is building a company and could see like the ideal future, you think you have these dreams of like, man, I'm never going to drive again. I'm going to have a driver when I
right,
make it, right? And Trump came from wealth and he
right,
had and he has a plane with his name on it and a helicopter with his name on it and a building with his name on it. So for him, his dream might be, oh man, like when I'm old enough, I'm gonna drive myself because nobody will be able to, like I want the freedom because I've always had this. We always kind of want to do what we've never had, right?
yeah,
And in some way, I think that that's what gets lost in it is that he does these average normal things because he wants to be able to experience that because he's always experienced vast wealth.
right.
Whereas the other people want to be able to experience vast wealth because they grew up with nothing, right? Or normal middle class. So it's an interesting conundrum in that is he really more authentic or is he, a tourist in authentic, not more authentic. Is he more everyman or is he a tourist as an everyman in that experience? Because he probably took a private plane to meet that investor, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
I'm not taking private planes.
yeah.
So it's an interesting thing, and I don't know that you have like it's not necessarily a question, but it jumps in my mind of like but it plays differently and I think we need to remember to be both things once you make it and you are Hillary and you now have a couple $100 million or whatever,
Mhm.
still being normal is important, otherwise you lose sight of like the overall life. Neither is that's not real life to have hundreds of
Yeah,
millions of dollars,
yeah.
right?
I,
So
I could get
yeah.
used to it. The I could I would like to report back. The I also think what kind of help Trump is that he was in two really shitty mercurial businesses of real estate and casinos.
Yeah,
Casino, margins are interesting, but it's all kind of consumer walk-in. I mean, it's this
yeah,
really kind of. I did some work for a casino, and it's an incredibly sophisticated thing in terms of the revenue streams,
hmm,
and like it comes down to like when you walk through the front entrance, if there isn't this or that, or if there isn't that, or to get to a bathroom,
yeah,
you have to, and it's like at that level of what the people notice and what the people do, and I think that if you are hyper concerned, if that's your brain, then you kind of think like that.
yeah,
If you were in think tanks and legislatures,
right.
you probably don't think like that.
This actually strikes me about what you said. We were talking about a minute ago with the marketing and everything as well. Like there's a great podcast with Joe Rogan and a gentleman who looks at like the addictiveness of apps. And
Mm-hmm.
they talk about how app companies have started to work with a company. There's one gigantic regular sized casino in Vegas that's
Mm-hmm.
not open to the public. And all they do is they bring people in and they test the psychology of how to get you to like become addicted to gambling, basically, right? And it's all psychological. What do you do when? And to be in that business, now I'm thinking like, how many times did he get during that period of his life of like, no, you do this here because it triggers this behavior. You do this here. So I don't think he's stupid. I always thought people that said he was stupid were very stupid for
Yeah.
saying that. So if he's absorbing that psychology of getting people to take actions, calls to action, then it makes sense that he's such a good marketer, that he is able to position himself to make you do what he wants you to do.
Yeah, and I also think that the other thing that he has that is shocking to the level that he has it is a certain amount of resiliency that no matter how bad it is, he just kind of puts his head down and grinds on.
Yeah.
And most of us would be cowered by grab him by the pussy. That would have been the end of my career,
Right.
or January 6th, or pick one of 5,000 things that would have derailed the average human being.
Sure.
And he just plows through because he understands, I think instinctually, news cycles and popularity and all that stuff. And I mean, he had a #1 show on TV for, I mean, I never watched it because that's not what I do.
Yeah.
But I was shocked to see how popular it was. And I've seen clips of it, and he's really fucking good in it. He's really good in it. And that is not a, he would be an awesome pod host, host, or put him on Fox News or CNN as a fucking host doing an hour talk show where it's whatever the fuck he wants to do,
Right.
and it would be fucking riveting.
Right. Okay, so speaking of riveting, thoughts on Hulk Hogan at the convention? I mean,
I saw the clip this morning and I was just like, and the only thing I could think of, and again, not an original thought here on my end, but was Idiocracy.
Yeah.
Fucking president. It's like President Camacho, baby.
Everybody's drinking their soda. What was the blue? And they sprayed it. They used it to like water the yards and stuff.
Yeah, it wasn't Gatorade. It was like it's got electrolytes.
Yeah. And what are electrolytes? Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, yeah. Does that play well? Because I know that I'm not everyone, right? So what I think may not be what other people think. So do you think that plays well, the Hulk Hogan kind of circus and gladiator of it all, or?
I think it's a wink, and again, here's where I'm going to tell you that I think it's, whether on purpose or not, I think it's clever. And again, I mean, I pro wrestling is something else that I've never seen. I mean, who these guys are because they're pop culture figures, and I thought more interesting was Hulk Hogan's Gawker suit. That I was riveted to. But they understand that this is a TV show and it's entertainment. And Hulk Hogan, as opposed to the Secretary of State or the fuck it is, sure. It's not even a choice. I'm going to watch Hulk Hogan because it's kind of different. And also, there is something that it's almost a wink that this isn't that serious, and that you're all smart enough to know that this is. I mean, politicians love these fucking ponderous speeches. But if you're listening to Hulk Hogan, then you can't really believe that in 2 weeks, it's about the future of democracy and we're all going to go to fucking gulags because it's fucking Hulk Hogan. Right. I mean, it's like, it's not serious, and I think that in a lot of ways that lowers the temperature of everything.
That's an interesting take.
Because you realize it's entertainment, which what conventions are. And, conventions are a TV show.
Right.
And this was a musical variety show. is what they put on,
Yeah, yeah.
as opposed to, and again, the Democrats did the same thing with their entertainers and stuff. But I think that there is a kind of a super ponderous bit about it can't be about this can't be about fascism if it's fucking Hulk Hogan, who we all know
Right.
is a fake, right?
Right.
This isn't a plot, and so I think it works, whether intentionally or not. I think it kind of makes it less serious,
Hmm.
and again, Biden has this tendency of giving these very dark speeches,
Hmm.
like Trump did. I mean, Trump's
Yeah.
speech last night, I don't think it was, from what I've said, what I read, it doesn't seem dark. It just seemed rambling.
Hmm.
It was almost interstitial. Um, uh, by the way, somebody said that the two, it was something else I wish I could take credit for, that the two hardest jobs in America are doing transcriptions for Joe Biden and running teleprompter for Donald Trump.
It'd be funny if it was the same person.
Yeah,
You know what I
right.
mean? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Somebody just like gets up every day and he's like
Yeah,
fucking 4 packs a day, and
for
he's
sure. For sure. He wakes up with a shot of Jim Beam.
yeah, he's got a Jim Beam and his fucking espresso, triple espresso and a Jim Beam. I mean,
Exactly.
that would be great. I would watch that. I would watch that.
Let me ask you
Yeah,
about the a little bit
yeah,
more of like on the political side.
yeah.
So JD Vance is now on the ticket. The way it works in Ohio, I guess nationally as
Mhm.
well, he can stay senator, and if they lose the ticket, he stays on as senator. So let's just imagine he wins. And do you know how it works in Ohio? Will DeWine make an appointment and have to call a special election, or is the rest of the term completed by the appointment? How do you know how that works?
Yeah, I believe in Ohio, DeWine gets to make the appointment, and then the next election is the next regular election. It's not a special.
Okay, so the whoever will complete the term
Right. So Vance
to
was elected in,
2028.
right, or yeah, 2028
Yeah.
would be it. So, whoever he puts in is going to be, um, there will be a lot of politicking on that, because basically, given the increasing Republican nature of Ohio, you're giving somebody a U.S. Senate seat for life.
Right, right,
And DeWine is, I guess, in his 70s, so he's not going to be it.
right.
Um, and I don't know who his lieutenant governor is, but it would be an interesting choice. Um,
Um, is Vivek a resident of Ohio?
I don't know. I don't know.
My thinking was, do you think whoever he appoints, I mean, depending on who he appoints, is there any chance that that person, because they are completing the term, there's an opening for Tim Ryan to come back and run for that seat?
Yeah, yeah, I think there would be. Um, I'll tell you, it would be interesting, really fucking interesting too. It wouldn't happen. Tim Ryan flips, becomes a Republican, and DeWine appoints him.
Oh, interesting.
That would never happen. But
Yeah.
like part of the problem for any scenario is 2028 might as well be the year 3000 politically.
Mm.
And who the heck knows? Um,
I will say that
yeah,
I spoke with many elected representatives and non-elected representatives, and they were all pretty adamant that the next two election cycles are not beneficial for Republicans.
no,
Um,
no, they're not.
so the way the math lines up, the interesting thing about why I think this election is so important is I do think that whoever I do think that if Trump is elected, we may end up with 5 justices on the Supreme Court that he has nominated, and
Yeah,
that will affect for a very long time.
yeah,
And I think that is the single most important thing to vote on. It either
yeah,
maybe not for Republicans because maybe they don't care, they
yeah,
already have full control. But if you are a Democrat, that is probably what I would run on if I was a
yeah.
Democrat.
Well, and it'll be interesting to see if Biden lose. Sotomayor doing the RGB "I'm selfish" thing, and also Biden doing the "I'm selfish" thing.
Right.
Uh, and it's once again, I think it undercuts the seriousness of the argument.
Yeah.
I think Biden undercuts the seriousness of the threat to democracy.
Yeah.
If Trump was a threat to democracy, would would the world's oldest political party be nominating a guy who says his uncle was eaten by fucking cannibals? I
Right.
mean,
Right. Right.
right? Or I know he didn't quite say that, but
I understand what you're saying.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, that kind of undercuts that.
Right.
Uh, and
Yeah, and I mean, I read a couple articles about people trying to get Sotomayor to go out. I mean, she's
mhm.
what, 50? She's 68 or something like that. She's
Yeah,
like
she's
late
not that.
six. Yeah, she's not.
I don't know if she's in good health or not. I mean, that's kind of the question. I mean, if she's
Yeah.
in good health, and there was also this kind of thing about term limits for Biden was going to propose term limits, or one of the proposals was
Yeah.
term limits for Supreme Court justices. Well, you need to amend the fucking Constitution to
Yeah,
do.
it's not happening.
It's like that kind of stuff is like, and that kind of stuff also says I am not serious.
Yes, agreed. Because it's not it's just a non-starter. You're just talking to talk at that point.
Right, and it's like the rent control thing.
Right.
It is a
Same.
non, like, you hear that and you kind of go, this makes you not serious.
Right. 100%.
You
What
know,
would make you more serious would say we're going to expand Medicare and Medicaid to everyone or something like that.
right,
Something that you can actually do.
right,
Do that. Do you know what I
right.
mean? But yeah, you can't tell New York City what renters or what they're going to charge, and you're the
Yeah,
federal government, not yeah.
yeah, and that shows a certain amount of White House chaos,
Mm,
because there are. I mean, if you did not like the Inflation Reduction Act or whatever else they passed, like, great, but you can't deny that those were serious legislative proposals with a lot of moving parts.
mhm.
This is somebody walking in to a meeting with a poll that says, it's really popular? Rents. Everybody would like their rent lower. And somebody says, I mean, this is policy douchiness. That
Yeah.
if you're the White House policy people, if you're the policy team, you probably want to throw yourself off the top of the, Washington Memorial, Washington Monument. But and it hurts me. It undercuts seriousness.
And the interesting thing about it is both sides do this, but it just seems stupider when you're trying to be the serious party, right? Like
Right.
we're
Right.
going to deport 12 million people from the United States. No, you're not.
No, you're not.
No, you're not. Let's not bullshit each other. No, you're not.
Right.
But uh, but that one seems to be addressing. First of all, it feels good because it's an issue that people care about and has
Mhm.
gotten worse. So there's that. And it seems like something that is less pandering because it's been a consistent issue for a long time for the candidate
Right.
since the first race.
Right.
Um, all right, have we beaten to death the convention talk yet? Is there any
I
are there
think
any
so.
other highlights that we didn't cover?
No, the only thing I would say is that what a convention does won't be known for a week or so.
Yeah.
In a week, you may see a pop, and you may not see a pop, or you may see a narrative that has come out of it that
Yeah.
people will make sense of later, or not. So, it's kind of like a convention or a big political event. It is kind of like watching fireworks. You see the light go, and then you hear the boom.
Right. Right.
So, like, next week's podcast will be about
So
what
the
happened.
So I have to say, Milwaukee I did go to the Pfister Hotel like you suggested. I went actually two different days. Um, had dinner there one night. Great bar on the rooftop. Great
Yeah.
location. It's a beautiful city. That I would say is a hidden gem. I had never really realized that
Yeah.
it was a beautiful city. So I'm curious if you know, how does the city selection go? Because as I was in the city, I was thinking to myself, man, it'd be pretty cool is if you went to one of those places where people feel overlooked. If the Democrats did their convention in like West Virginia, in Morgantown, West
Mhm.
Virginia, or and they may have to spend more money because there might not be enough accommodation. So then you might have to bring in the accommodation somehow, right? And I don't know if the locals would even like that. It could be a huge disruption in their life, but it would also be a huge infusion of cash into
Mhm.
their lives as well. And it would really call into bring into focus, like, yeah, and also I think you can do circus and those things. I think it would be really smart if the Democrats said, fuck celebrities. We're
Mhm.
bringing people in from the city. So
Mhm.
we're bringing so and so who owns a store. We got food
Mhm.
from this place for this event. We're bringing them in and stuff like that. Um, I don't know what you think of that, but like I don't know how it gets selected, and I don't know why it would only be. I mean, it's not usually the first cities. It's not like New York and LA. It was like Denver, whatever.
Mhm.
Chicago, I guess, is a first city. But um, what do you think? Am I off base there?
Uh, no, but so cities are selected. There is a convention select parties. The DNC and the RNC have a convention selection committee, which is um, a great thing to get put on because it's a fucking boondoggle and you fly around and wine and dine and you visit places.
Yeah.
And then they ask the cities to put a bid and a proposal in once they narrow it down to like 5 cities.
Mhm.
And the cities are always kind of random. There's no strategic thought to them because you have to plan so far out. Who the fuck knows?
Mhm.
Um, the idea with doing it in a far off place is simply a matter of infrastructure. Do
Right.
you have enough hotels? When they had the conventions in Philadelphia,
Mhm.
they had to put people in Jersey and they had to put people in Delaware and they had to bus them
Right.
in simply because there weren't enough hotels.
Right. Right.
So places with a lot of hotels and infrastructure um, tend to get popped to the top of the list.
Right.
The problem with regular people, and I know in God, it was it 04 or 2000 that Bush did that. I think it might have been 04, that each
Oh.
day of the convention was a thing about with real people. The problem with putting real people on in prime time is that networks will cut away. If
Mm.
it's Hulk, nobody was cutting away from Hulk Hogan.
Right. 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 Right.
But if it's Fred Pisarkowitz from that, just opened a deli in Madison, Wisconsin.
Right.
Fuck him.
Right.
Um, and
Yeah. Yeah. We
even
don't.
though he's probably more interesting than Hulk Hogan would be.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
and it's like spends 20 minutes of his speech talking about how you cure tongue for a really good sandwich. I would watch the shit out of that.
Yeah. It'd be interesting. So basically, from what I'm hearing, it should be a city that can host the Super Bowl. It's basically about the same thing, right?
Yeah,
You have
yeah,
to have the
basically.
accommodation. Okay.
So and also too is that you want it to be a city where there's stuff to do.
Right. Right.
And again, Milwaukee it's really an underrated gem of a city.
It really is. Yeah.
It's really a terrific place.
I mean, at least in July. Ask me
Yeah.
in January, I'd probably be like, I'm not going anywhere near that fucking
No,
place. But
no.
yeah,
It's like Dresden after the war. It's like holy shit.
yeah, for sure.
But no, but
Okay. All right. So that I get your point.
but you could do. There's no reason you couldn't do Charleston because
Yeah.
you could also there's a bunch of states you could pull
Yeah.
from,
Yeah.
and it's
I,
really
I'll
close to.
tell you right now, the Democrats should have their next convention
Yeah.
in Georgia. Georgia is trending purple. They should do
Mhm.
Atlanta. They should plant a flag in a
Yep.
southern swing state or in
Yeah.
an overlooked swing state that is transitioning from red to blue it's in
Hmm.
some phase of purple, and they should do that rather than deep blue Chicago. That's ridiculous in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, enough of the convention talk. Other political news. Curious, what are you tracking right now that non-presidential elections that people should be paying attention to? What should we be looking at right now? Doesn't even have to be federal. I actually
Yeah.
think there's some interesting state things, but
So here's what I'm looking at right now is what I'm going to call trend lines. And it was a little shaky last week. It's been kind of a active article of faith, not active faith, article of faith that if Trump or Biden looks like a clear winner, voters are going to vote the opposite party.
okay.
And so, for instance, we saw last week that poll comes out and Trump has expanded his lead in Pennsylvania, and incumbent Senator Bob Casey has also expanded his lead.
Right.
And you would think that there would be coattails.
Right.
No, it's people are saying, I want these guys to watch those guys, and which is very common. What is interesting with Biden now, or every time he gets up, and I mean, he couldn't remember the name of his Secretary of Defense and the black guy, but like all those stuff, at a certain point, I'm watching, and I would say consultants are watching, if there is a backlash to Democrats that say, to quote Biden, come on, Jack, you knew this guy was bad for years and you're still supporting him.
Right.
You know, if it's Biden's convention, you know, the amount of elected officials in tough states who are going to have something else to do that week. I mean, John Tester already came out and John Tester said he shouldn't run.
Yeah.
Because John Tester has a tough race in a tough state.
Right.
And
I know we moved past presidential a little bit, but let me ask you a question. What do you think is more important? If you're a Democrat, you're a Republican, would you rather win the White House or would you rather win the full Congress?
White House.
Interesting. Okay.
Because there's more jobs. No, there's more jobs and there's more stuff you can do.
Okay.
And frankly, if you're a Politico, it's easier to build your career from the White House than being the Senate Majority Leader as Chief of Staff. And it's purely a function of careerism.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. But you want the White House because you can affect policy and you can appoint to courts and you can do the EPA and the FDA and the FCC and the FEC. I mean, you can do all these kind of things. And you know, and if it's a closed Congress, which it'll be no matter who wins, it's going to be a seat or two either way.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. If the Republicans get the trifecta, what are the odds that they get rid of the filibuster, the rest of the filibuster?
None.
Or what will they revert it back to a standing filibuster?
Well, I think if McConnell's out now, so and I don't know. What is it? Thune now they're saying might be.
Yeah, I mean Cornyn here in Texas. I thought he had a good chance, but he seems to be fading. So yeah. It seems like Thune.
If it's Thune, you could, because he's an institutionalist and he could get it back. What's interesting is that my boy Bob Menendez got convicted this week.
Yes, he did.
And what was interesting is that nobody's saying he's got to resign, he's got to go. Yeah. And
I saw some Democratic calls for him to resign, but it hasn't been a loud chorus. I also didn't know if maybe what I was getting was being overshadowed by the convention, what I was paying attention to. But you're right. I mean,
I mean, you know, and again, I think it kind of it undercuts Democrats a bit. That, you know, Republicans had George Santos, who was not convicted of a crime, and they got rid of him because he was an embarrassment.
Yeah.
And, you know, you've got one of the most traditionally corrupt guys in the U.S. Senate, Bob Menendez, you know, who's been on trial and investigated for his entire political career, and they finally got him. And he's going to be still a sitting and voting U.S. Senator. And I could even see the real politic of it. But you've got a Democratic governor who's going to appoint a Democrat, and he could appoint a caretaker. I mean, he could appoint his wife who just ran because she wanted to be a U.S. Senator. Or he could appoint Andy Kim, who's the guy.
Yeah.
There are a lot of really easy choices, but to let a guy who is a convicted felon there undercuts Trump 34.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally agree.
You know,
Also, did you see the documents case was tossed in
yeah,
Florida?
yeah,
I,
which, yeah,
it seems that the last from the debate forward has been a streak of Republican wins for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Um,
But by the way, the prosecutor in the documents case, and obviously it's so this is the third big case that he's lost.
mm,
He did the John Edwards prosecution,
mhm.
where basically John Edwards was paying off the woman he knocked up.
Yeah.
And the Supreme Court said, no, get the fuck out of here. Then Bob McDonnell, who was governor of Virginia,
Mm,
who he convicted of basically taking bribes.
mhm,
And the Supreme Court said, get the fuck out of here.
mhm.
And now this one, but these are really big, high profile cases. This guy's losing. But
Yeah.
talking to some, political lawyer stuff, they seem to think that this woman's Cannon is going to get overturned. They think it's a bad ruling.
Yeah, I mean, even if you listen to former AG Barr, he felt like this was the strongest case. It was a clear
Yeah,
crime, right?
yeah,
So it was always the case that I thought should have gotten the most attention.
yeah.
And it's sad that it went the way that it did because that will never be adjudicated before we vote. So people
No,
will never know the details. And then I have very little faith that it will ever be adjudicated, regardless of whether she gets overturned or
right.
not.
Yeah, no. I think that's the end of it. And I think that there's still the dumpster fire of the Atlanta case,
Yeah.
which is
And no bullshit, Chris.
yeah.
If Trump wins, Cannon will replace Clarence Thomas on the court. No bullshit. She has earned her
Mhm.
spot on the court.
Sure.
Don't let's not bullshit ourselves
Right,
here. She's the
right.
next Supreme Court justice.
It's a good long-term bet. That's a good long-term bet.
Listen, yeah, I've thought about this with like JD Vance and some others.
Mhm.
We didn't talk about Nikki Haley, but whatever.
Right.
You can hate people for being hypocrites. You can say, oh, these flip-flop or being clear partisan hacks or whatever it might be. And I threw out 3 Republicans, but you could do the same
Right.
thing on the
Yeah.
Democratic side. But you're only hating them because you're not smart enough or not willing to do what it takes for your own benefit either. And you elevate yourself morally. It's a principle that I remember reading in the 48 Laws of Power. It's like,
Mhm.
don't hate these people that are willing to do the thing that needs to be done for their power to be able to make the changes they want to make. So I've thought about it a lot because it can turn your stomach, but it is still a
Yeah.
necessary evil,
So I read a book earlier this year. It's called The Lincoln Miracle, which I highly recommend. Author's last name is Ahern,
Mhm.
and basically it's just about Lincoln getting the nomination in 1860. And to your point, self-promotion, shameless backstabbing,
Totally.
forging documents, forging passes, forging delegate things. I mean, like if it was today, there was no way Lincoln would have gotten to be president
Right.
because it was so, shameless, hardball, real politic. You got to be kidding me stuff. And so it's really fun to, but it's Abe Lincoln.
For sure.
And absolutely true. It's like, and all this shit. I mean, whatever you think of JD Vance, if he becomes president, he's going to have a Washington cherry tree story. He grew up,
Yes.
he grew up without shoes in Appalachia and he became that's going to be the story, right?
100%. 100%. I said this actually coming back from the airport last night. I was talking to my dad and I said, we can't afford to be true believers because that's the marketing. Like
Yeah.
nobody sees it that way if they're inside the game. And only on the outside are we reading the mythology and believing that Zeus really fathered Athena. Like that's
Right.
not the reality of the situation. It was a backroom deal. You know what I'm saying? It's like
Yeah. And I think that, but I think it's the history of this stuff that, don't watch the sausages getting made, but, and again, I'll continue to pick on Vance, you know, but if JD Vance does become president, this was a guy from the middle of fucking shithole Ohio
Sure.
who should have been, operating the Piggly Wiggly, or some other thing. And so it's the hero story,
Yeah.
but not in the way
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
like it told.
For
You
sure.
know?
We like it to be a little bit cleaner.
We like Athena. We like, it's like George Washington. He smote the ground and up, rose George Washington, fully born on his white charger, leading the
Right,
deck.
right.
You know,
Exactly. Um, Last thing I want to end
yeah.
with, I wanted to ask you, there's been a huge movement. I think there's now at least a dozen or more California venture capitalists that have supported Donald Trump,
Mhm.
both Andreessen and Horowitz from Andreessen Horowitz. Um, how much of the movement to Trump is caused by the mismanagement of California by the Democratic Party? How much of what should be and traditionally were maybe Democratic mega donors now saying this is untenable. We're seeing firsthand what happens if Democrats control everything. Um, how much do you lay at the feet of Gavin Newsom and the complete control of California by Democrats?
I had not thought of that, but I think it's a really good point, because if you are living in San Francisco and living in places like their LA, and every day you're seeing people shitting in the street,
Yeah.
or people overdosing, or petty theft, petty crime, the fact that you can't buy fucking deodorant
Mhm.
without getting someone to lock up your, unlock the cabinet.
Mhm.
And I think it's that kind of annoyance. And I think what really hurts them more than the situation is the absolute tone deafness of the situation.
For sure.
I mean, there was an article out this week that Newsom, basically there was a $15 billion homeless plan that became a $24 billion homeless plan, and the whole point, the reason they got it approved, was because it was going to be audited.
Mm.
And apparently the money has all been misspent, mismanaged, or whatever. And so Newsom vetoed the auditing power of that.
Wow.
And it was a fairly significant story.
Yeah.
Um, and it was because, the argument was, well, we can do that anyway already. It's duplicitous, and nobody believes that. And again,
Right.
the part of the problem is that nobody believes that.
Right. Right.
And I think that, if you have to step around junkie vomit every day, you have to blame somebody.
Yeah.
And it's okay if somebody's in there fighting with you, but if somebody's saying no, it's not a problem,
Right.
that's the thing. I mean,
And every solution can't be this is a institutional problem because of
right.
socioeconomic. No, man, solve the problems. Like it isn't, quit raising and making it more expensive to live while simultaneously making it easier to live on the street and kill yourself with fentanyl. Like solve the problems.
Yeah, I mean, I always point out, and I don't know what the stats are now, but for decades, New York and New York City had the lowest shooting rates, murder rates, homicide rates with guns
Hmm.
in the country.
Hmm.
Why? Because if you committed a crime with a gun, or were adjacent to a crime with a gun, you went away for the majority of your life. And
Right.
so if you were a career criminal, you knew, I'm not going to, like, I'll go to New Jersey and do a crime, and Pennsylvania do a crime, but I'm not going to do it in New York City.
Right.
And, the idea that, and again, resulted in unfair cases, guys went away that shouldn't have gone away. I get all that. On the other hand, people aren't getting fucking shot dead.
Right.
So,
Right.
so
Exactly.
maybe there's a mitigation you do on the policy, but to say I oppose a policy of people not being shot in LA or Philadelphia or Chicago is
Right.
fucking insane.
Right. And also, I would only add that the murder rates in Mississippi, Alabama are higher
Right.
than a lot of those cities. And I think for me, the biggest takeaway is that uniparty control, whether it's China, California, or
Yeah.
Mississippi, is always a bad idea.
Always a bad idea.
Good ideas come from everywhere on all sides of the political spectrum, and you need that balance to have the best functioning government for the people. And it requires the compromise. You take the good and you try to remove as much bad as possible. And that requires people that disagree finding a path forward.
So here, it's a good place to leave it, and I will leave it with a piece of political history. One of my clients, Arlen Specter, first ran for DA in Philadelphia in 1965, and he ran on a ticket with a guy named Tom Gola, who was a famous basketball player. He's like a citywide hero. And the entire city was Democrat run and had been democratically run for a couple of decades. And their slogan, they were running for DA and controller is essentially the fiscal watchdog. But their slogan was, "We need these guys to watch those guys."
Oh, yeah, exactly.
And that's
very smart.
That's pretty fucking great.
That's very smart.
You know, and it's just like, I don't know if you could use that today because of the gender thing in it, but boy, it's like, why vote for them? Because we need these guys to watch. I mean, brilliant. Anyway,
today we need them to watch they. That's it. Just leave it like that. Leave it at that. All right. Have a good weekend.
Thanks,
I will see you next week.
All right, you bet. Bye.
Bye.